In fact, the chorus for the United States, and this is true under Biden, it was true under previous administrations when Israel faced attacks from Hamas and from Hezbollah and from other places. The refrain is hold back, restrain yourself, do not fight to win, do not fight to defeat your enemies, do not fight to end this war conclusively. And we're seeing it now in Gaza since October 7th. The US has been relentless in insisting on that Israel hold back, delay, create humanitarian, so-called humanitarian corridors, provide relief, humanitarian relief. All of these are negating Israel's right to defend itself, which I don't think the United States would tolerate in any other context with respect to its own citizens and its responsibility to protect them. This is a moral inversion. It's separating out what is good and what is practical. And this comes from, I think it comes from a widely held moral view that is shaping and influencing American policy, which is, it's really undercutting. And I think of this as the great moral inversion. You can see it in the moments right after October 7th. There was a moment, maybe a day or so, when many people healthily reacted and said, yes, Israel has to defend itself, has to retaliate against this barbarism. But that faded. And it's now, we notice when you see news reports and coverage about this, the reality of what Hamas did is now well in the background. It's as if it's a footnote, it's a passing comment, it's a box that you check when you talk about this. It doesn't have the same reality, and it certainly doesn't have the moral reality that it needs to have in the way people think about this issue. So it's now in the background. And what is now in the foreground is Israel's retaliation, and that is seen as morally suspect, at least, if not worse. And this is coloring the US approach, because even as the US is giving military and material support, it's withholding what I think of as the most significant kind of support, which is the moral endorsement that it's right to retaliate against this enemy. And this is an inversion because morally, who's responsible for the war? It's Hamas as the initiator of the conflict, as the one that attacked on October 7th and attacked previously as well. What happens under this conventional moral view is that the moral responsibility is dropped out of the context. It's ignored, it's evaded, it's pushed aside. And what is dominant in people's thinking is the visceral, emotional reaction to suffering, because this moral idea, which Ayn Rand calls it altruism, it's the idea that morality is about negation of success, negation of value, sacrificing. What that teaches is a focus on suffering, lack of value, misery. And when people see that, and it's real, there's certainly significant suffering in Gaza, that overwhelms their ability to think about the issue morally. And they now are focused on how Israel is making things worse for the Palestinians. That is a complete inversion. The real question here, the real issue is, why isn't there no comparable, or why is there no outrage at the fact that Hamas created this crisis, this war, and that all the suffering that is seen in Gaza right now, that is entirely Hamas's responsibility? And we don't see that because this is the influence of the moral idea of altruism. And some of the evidence for this, right? So some of the evidence for this is not only is Israel pressured to allow aid convoys into Gaza. Just think about that for a moment. It's a war zone, and yet it's supposed to provide aid. It has to support a essentially hostile population. The aid goes, some of it undoubtedly goes to Hamas. That is an essentially sacrificial position. So the issue now is not whether Israel should allow these convoys in. It's how dare Israel inspect these convoy trucks? How dare it limit the number of trucks? Why isn't it providing more trucks? And notice the inversion here. Why is that the focus versus the evil of Hamas for creating this crisis and for exploiting all the people above ground and not in the tunnels?